Why is it necessary, four-year-old company, to raise such extraordinary amount of capital in the pursuit of transformative AI?
Yes, so I can't comment on specific news articles, but certainly in the past we've done multiple multi-billion-dollar raises from both Google and Amazon as well as other investors. But the reason is just that the development of this technology is very expensive. I and my co-founders at Anthropic were among the first to document what we call the scaling laws for AI systems. And the scaling laws for AI systems show that when you pour more and more compute into AI systems, you get better and better performance across a wide range of cognitive tasks. And that's gone from, stuff that we would say was just really simple and primitive, back in the mists of 2019 or whatever, to today where models are climbing the curve of how well they can do at coding. And so each new model is in various different ways more expensive than models that came before, and we're getting into the billions of dollars in terms of the cost of developing these models. And so that requires capital. Of course, as the models get better, then the returns get better and better. Every new model has cost more, but has also generated much more revenue than the previous model.
So OpenAI, Oracle, and SoftBank just announced a $500 billion joint venture with the backing of the Trump administration called Project Stargate. How do you interpret that announcement, and what was visually being presented there with Masa-san next to Sam Altman, next to Larry Ellison, all behind Donald Trump? And should we expect a similar announcement, blessed by Trump, maybe from Anthropic in the future?
Yeah, so I think speaking to the policy aspects of this, one thing I've been saying, and I'll say here, is Anthropic thinks of itself as more of a policy actor than a political actor. What do I mean by that? What I mean is, being a public benefit corporation, we have a view of, what does the country need to do, what do companies need to do, in order to make this transition we're facing, right? This increasing power of AI systems that has so much promise, but also has the opportunity to present risks to go well. And we have a number of ideas that we've advocated for. I've gone to the Hill. I've gone to the previous administration. I'm going to the incoming administration to talk about the importance of doing that. And there are many topics in that area, but one of them was certainly energy provision, right? And in particular, providing that energy inside the United States so that we don't have to go to countries that we trust less for some of the critical security infrastructure around AI systems, and making sure that we can clear out enough regulatory and permitting hurdles so that it's possible to build this energy. So that is something, in a general sense, we've been advocating for a long time. So in that sense, I think provisioning more energy is certainly a good thing from that perspective. I think on the particular project, it was a bit hard to make head or tail of it. It seemed a bit chaotic. It's not clear how much money is actually involved and how much of that was committed. Different numbers were thrown out. It's not clear which company actually had the money or how it would be applied. It was, presented along with the Trump administration, but it's not clear what, if any, the role of the government actually was in it. So I think it's hard to comment without having more details.
Well, just to follow up, do you worry that the government here is picking a winner and could advantage OpenAI?
Yeah, this is again has always been our perspective here, right? Our goal isn't to try and get the inside track with one particular government or another particular government. It's to kind of lay out a policy platform and say what we need to happen. And our view, which I think will be vindicated, I'm not sure, is that if we do that, there will be enough of the right things to go around. If we make ourselves substantively helpful, things will work themselves out. Some players may be more flashy about it than others, may see it as more of a political thing than others. But we work with our cloud partners. We work with our cloud partners as well. And for many years, we've been thinking about how to scale. For years, I've been saying $100 million in 2023, $1 billion in 2024, $10 billion, $100 billion. So we've been planning accordingly.
Okay, well, let's keep talking about policy, because one of the first things that President Trump has done is to cancel President Biden's executive order on AI, which was meant to enforce safety, prevent bias, protect privacy. I mean, you've been an incredible evangelist for these values in the development of safe AI. So what do you make of that, and what does the Trump administration replace it with?
Yeah, so first we should get the facts straight, right? There's been a lot of this kind of totemic thing around the executive order. The executive order was actually a relatively simple thing that didn't do much. What it did do, I actually thought was good, but it didn't do much. The main thing it introduced from the perspective of frontier model development was reporting requirements on models above a certain scale. Basically, you just have to say how much compute did I put into it, what kinds of testing did I do, all completely voluntary. I think it used up probably, 1 day's time of one person, at Anthropic per year to comply with this executive order. So I think it was a good thing, but also not a big deal that it's being taken away. I think things that are much more important. I've advocated these things to the Biden admin. I'm advocating the same to the Trump admin. So I think to back up a bit, to the scaling laws that I think motivate most of this policy. My view, and I've been saying over the last few days that I'm becoming more confident in it. This idea that we may be only 2 or 3 years away from AI systems being better than humans at almost all tasks. So this I've called in my essay, Machines of Loving Grace, a country of geniuses in a data center. And of course, if you have that country of geniuses in a data center, you can do a number of extremely positive things, curing diseases, extending the human lifespan. I said in that, essay, I wouldn't be surprised if after having these models for a few years, we're able to, double the human lifespan. That sounds extreme. I think it's, as a former biologist, I think it's within the realm of possibility. So all these great things, but the fact that, just imagine that you're kind of airlifting or helicopter dropping tens of thousands of basically geniuses, people who are smarter than a Nobel Prize winner across many fields, can do anything that you could do on a virtual, basically anything you could do on a computer, and maybe even could build robots for themselves and project themselves into the physical world eventually. There are all kinds of questions around the balance of power, right? There are all kinds of things about our economic system, our military system, and security system are based on assumptions about how power is balanced. And so the risks that I see are all around ways that balance could be disrupted. So I worry about the autonomous risk of AI systems. The idea that when we make these highly autonomous systems that are smarter than a Nobel Prize winner and act over, many days to do a task, are they literally doing what we want them to do, right? It's not that, they have like a will or an essence of their own. I don't speak in those terms, but just they're being given a long leash. They have a lot of autonomy. There's a lot of potential for things to go wrong. If you dropped 10 billion or 10 million, geniuses into a new country, one question to ask is, what are they going to do? Are they a threat to everyone currently on Earth? And then you could also ask, can individuals within our world, use them to do dangerous things, right? The terrorism approach, and can countries, particularly our adversaries, particularly authoritarian countries, do especially dangerous things with them. And so our view on policy is it's all derived from that. So we've been big on export controls on chips going to China, because I'm very worried about what an authoritarian country would do with that kind of power. I'm very worried about 1984 scenarios or worse. And the 21st century not being the American century, which I think will happen, and will happen very quickly if we don't get this right. So that's, I wrote an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal with Matt Pottinger, who was Trump's principal deputy national security advisor, emphasizing the importance of this. The energy provision that we've talked about before is the other side of that. We don't want the chips to go to China or other authoritarian countries, but we do want to be able to build as much energy as we can over here. We want to make this go right so that we have these resources in the United States. The other side of it is, even as we guard against the dangers of authoritarian countries, we have to worry that the systems we ourselves build pose dangers. If we deploy one of these systems, or if someone steals them, could a single person do much more harm? Right? I think all the way back to, I think it was, 2000, I read an essay by Bill Joy called Why the Future Doesn't Need Us, where he talked about this idea that as technology advances, there's a greater and greater potential for single individuals to do more and more harm. And I worry that that will be the case in AI in a way that it won't necessarily be the case that other AIs can defend against that. So for that reason, we've always been an advocate of testing and measurement of AI systems for national security risks. This is the work that's been done in the U.S. AI Safety Institute, and so we've been a big proponent of that.
On the topic, you mentioned China and the risk of countries that maybe don't share the U.S.'s same values
Yes.
Advancing in AI. Have you seen the latest DeepSeek model that has kind of taken the AI world by storm, a very competitive model, right, coming out of a Chinese company? And what do you make of it? What does that say about the state of Chinese AI?
So it's been reported at least that DeepSeek has something like 50,000 H100s. You can never be sure what's true or not.
Now, these are NVIDIA chips.
H100s are NVIDIA chips, and that's half the size, just for reference of Elon's, reported Colossus cluster. But it's much less than the amount of chips that we or some of the other players are planning to build in the next year, which I think will go into the high hundreds of thousands in 2006, probably in 2026, probably into the millions, and in 2027, from different players, as we saw yesterday, potentially into the tens of millions of chips. We're actually at this moment with these new type of scaled RL or reasoning models where there's kind of a switchover point where, because we're switching paradigms, it's possible to make strong models with, in this new paradigm without a huge amount of compute. At the same time as China has been able to smuggle, again, mid-tens of thousands of chips. So I think what the export controls are going to be about is making sure that China can't get from those, mid-tens of thousands of chips to hundreds of thousands and millions of chips. If they do that, we may be at parity, or they may even be ahead. If that happens and we can't avoid it, then we'll have to go to another branch of the tree. We'll have to think of another strategy about, how to have a security equilibrium in the world where several different players are at parity. But I'm hopeful that we can avoid that with strong export controls, and I hope this is a bipartisan thing, and I honestly hope that the Trump administration continues this. I know that there are a number of folks in the Trump administration who understand the logic of this and are supportive.
By the way, do you feel like you have a voice in that discussion? Are you in touch with David Sachs or Elon Musk?
Yeah, so here is where I would return to this idea that we're a policy actor, we're not a political actor.
But the political game is part of the job these days.
Look, all I can do is offer our views to anyone who will listen.
And are they listening to you?
Yeah, yes, they are. It's the same views. We told the Biden admin these things. We told the Trump admin these things. Some folks coming in are going to agree more than others. But we've had, there's a lot of different players here. We've had conversations with some of them. And once we explain what the stakes are here, then people start to understand. I think people by default think of this as just like internet policy, right? We should deregulate, we shouldn't get in the way. On many areas, I agree with that, even many areas within AI. But this is something different. And I think, the more people we talk to, the more people start to understand.
And by the way, because of this heightened security risk, are there now sovereign wealth funds where you just won't raise money from? Are there countries whose capital you have turned away?
Yeah, I think my concern has been more about data centers in these countries or investments that have voting rights than investments that don't have voting rights. But I think there's a spectrum of concern here, right? Building all the infrastructure in some country we don't trust is up here. Voting control of the company would be there, and then passive investment would be further. So there's a spectrum of risks here that we should analyze rationally and understand the trade-offs.
Let's focus on the upside. We talked about some of the geopolitical risks. You mentioned life extension and your kind of renewed optimism about the kind of incredible progress that more sophisticated AI can bring. Have you seen something in the past 2 months since we last spoke and you wrote your essay that you referenced that's made you even more confident that we are going to reach this kind of potential super intelligence in the next few years by 2027? And if so, what is it that makes you more confident?
Yeah, I would definitely say that the switch from, pre-training as most of the compute that we use, right, the traditional, type of large language models that we train, to increasing work on, large-scale reinforcement learning in various forms. Every company has, different companies have put out different versions of this. We kind of have, are going to have our own version of this at some point. We'll do it a bit differently than some of the other players have done it. But, the scaling laws there continue and are strong. I think the scaling laws for pre-training actually are continuing as well, but now there's kind of two sources of it. So the trend is more robust. It's harder to stop it. There's more directions in which things can scale. So I've become more optimistic. I've also become more optimistic as we've talked about applications. We have talked to pharmaceutical companies about using Claude first in things like clinical trials, where they've been able to compress the length of clinical study reports from, usually those take 9 weeks or so. One pharma company that used Claude was able to generate the report in 10 minutes and check it in a few days. And now they're increasingly thinking about how to get into the real meat of drug discovery. I talked to one pharma company exec. I won't say which one, but apparently his CEO circulated my essay to the entire exec team and said, you should all read this because this is what's coming.
I feel like some of the AI old-timers are just a little bit more skeptical about the rate of progress. I was moderating a panel with Jan LeCun at
Yes.
Meta yesterday. He still says, your cat will be smarter than AI for many, many years. Are they defining the terms differently, or?
So it is really interesting because what it means to be a skeptic has moved, the line has moved. So Jan LeCun, I don't know about this essay, but he has said that, in posting skepticism with respect to this, he said, no, none of this stuff is going to happen for 5 years. So that's the skeptical point, right? And 2 to 3 years is happening soon. So skeptics used to say we won't have this stuff until 2100. And by the way, I still have some uncertainty. I think there's maybe a 5% chance that we get to 2100 and the technology is not substantially more advanced than it is now. Everyone laughs at me, and I look back 20 years, and I'm like, ha ha ha! Think about the time when we thought the whole world was changing, and there was going to be a giant new Cold War we'd have to deal with over AI.
We'll have you back on stage to eat some crow.
Exactly. Exactly, right? The technology will still be useful, but we'll laugh at how crazy we all were and how much crazier I was than everyone else. So again, 5% chance, maybe 10% chance. That's still what happened. I'm just willing to run that risk, willing to look stupid. But the skeptical position is this isn't going to happen for 5 years, maybe for 10 years. And so the skeptics have really moved the goalposts without acknowledging that that's what they've done.
We talked about the potential immense positive impact of something like helping with health. But this is also going to displace a lot of jobs, right, potentially. Do you think, and there's just great risk that you mentioned, right, especially if these systems get out of our human control. Do you think the world is ready for what you think is coming in the next 2-3 years?
Yeah, so I think one of my concerns is that I actually don't think the world is ready. Anthropic, has been concerned about these things for a very long time. And I think a lot of our work has focused on these kind of autonomy, these safety and security risks, and those are very important. Our view has been very technocratic. We focused on doing the research that's necessary to mitigate those risks. But I think over the last few months, I've become increasingly aware that there's kind of another task at hand, which is that the world as a whole deserves to know about what's coming. It's going to affect each individual person. For some of these job display, that's a separate topic, and we're starting to think quite a lot about that, and how to handle that in the short run and how to handle that in the long run in a way that we all end up in a good place on the other side. But I think the thing that's striking to me is that there's a slice of the AI research community for which this is starting to become conventional wisdom, right? Where 2 to 3 years, that wouldn't shock anyone. If you filled this room with a certain kind of person, it wouldn't shock anyone at all, right? Or even if I said it in the streets in San Francisco, it starts to maybe not shock people at all. But then you go to the outside world, and it's just totally different. And I'm a little worried about a world where people find out suddenly, all at once, maybe in response to a product, maybe in response to a security disaster. That doesn't strike me as good for anyone or leading to a thoughtful response. And so one reason why I'm now saying more in this interview and in other interviews that, yes, I think it's likely, not certain, but likely that we actually are only 2 to 3 years away is, I want to warn people. I want people to know about this. And, some of that is going to lead to people saying, well, what's your plan? What's your plan for economic disruption? What's your plan for the risks to the world? Some of these we've been working on for a long time. Others, because we're, a company of limited size, we're newer to working on. But it's really our conviction to try to have answers that are as good as we can on these questions. Now, some of it's just what's happening in the world. There's like a market equilibrium. There's only so much we can do, but we are really going to try our best to lead the way here, set an example, maximize the upsides, mitigate the downsides to the extent that's possible within the corporate ecosystem and the governmental constraints that we all face.
So, Dario, and we now have 2 minutes left. For the people in this room, for the people who are watching remotely, practically, what should we be doing to prepare?
Yeah. So I think I got asked a question yesterday about if you were like raising a kid, like what should you teach them? Gave 2 answers. One was like, well, the obvious answer is AI. Like, teach them how to use AI. This is how you adapt to these things better, and get us through to the point where we have a broader societal answer to all of this. And the second one was critical thinking skills. That as more and more reasoning thought is done by AI, we're going to more and more see reasoning that's like super persuasive but might have really subtle flaws in it. Even scientists will have to read things produced by AI that are almost as good as what a scientist would do, but there are lots of subtle flaws in it that may be hard to detect. And so cultivating in people this kind of critical thinking. In terms of what adults do,
or if you're a CEO of an organization.
Yeah. I think be aware of AI, adapt to AI, but also think about these problems of labor displacement. I think pure market capitalism can be pretty brutal here. And again, at some point, AI is going to be better than anyone at everything, and then we have to have this broader societal conversation about how we all handle it. But in the meantime, is there something we can do to kind of leaven a little bit this thing that could be fairly brutal if it's done in a totally free market way? Can we design our products in a way that makes the technology more complementary instead of replacing? Can companies act in a way that gives people more time to react? Can we have good government policy around this?